What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Motorola Moto G 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 81.4% screen-to-body ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch TFT display with a 720p resolution as well, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and an 81.6% screen-to-body ratio. So in general, despite a few minor differences, these displays are more or less the same. Both of them have 1080p resolutions, pretty much the same kind of display technology, and in general, despite not being the most amazing displays out there, for more entry-level 5G phones, they do look pretty good. That being said, the Moto G 5G does have a couple advantages here. First of all, in general, while the difference isn't really that noticeable, I do think the display is a little bit brighter with the Moto G 5G, and the viewing angles are just ever so slightly better. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, the Moto G 5G is probably going to be a tiny bit easier to see than the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, but again, it's really not by much. Another difference here is with the 90Hz refresh rate versus a 60Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen with the Moto G 5G is going to be a little bit faster and smoother. So if you're doing something with motion on the screen like watching a video or playing a game, for example, it's going to feel a little bit smoother and more fluid with the Moto G 5G, and when you're just using the phone in general, it's going to feel a tiny bit more premium. But again, this is a really subtle difference. You probably couldn't even tell in this video, and even when you're using the phones, unless you have them right next to each other, you're really not going to notice a whole lot. So overall, while if I had to pick one, I would say the Moto G 5G is a tiny bit better. For all intents and purposes, I feel like these phones' displays are pretty much equal. Now for storage, the Moto G 5G is getting 256GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G is getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now that being said, keep in mind there is a variant of the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G that has 64 instead of 128, but for the purpose of this video, this phone in my hand does have 128GB, so definitely keep this in mind. Regardless, the Moto G 5G still does have an advantage with double the storage of the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, but that being said, I feel like most people are going to be perfectly fine with 128GB, because while obviously not being nearly as much as 256, 128GB of internal storage, especially with microSD card expansion, is really not a small amount, and for the average user, again, you most likely won't need more than that. But that being said, if you're more of a power user, if you have a lot of apps and stuff like that, then of course the Moto G 5G with an extra 128GB will definitely be a better choice. Now for security features, both of these phones have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys, definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner, and they both have face unlock as well. But that being said, starting with the Moto G 5G, let's go ahead and give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. There we go, one more time. And there we go. Moving on to the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no complaints at all. And again, remember, both phones also have face unlock, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Moto G 5G, we got a hole punch design for the front facing camera, and this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. For video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so nothing really out of the ordinary there. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. For video, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G can record in up to 4K in the rear camera and 1080p in the front. So between the two, while neither phone has a bad camera setup, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G will have an advantage here. First of all, as far as features go, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G not only has an ultra wide camera, but it can also record 4K videos, at least in the rear camera, whereas the Moto G 5G doesn't have an ultra-wide camera, and it can also only record videos in 1080p. As far as quality goes, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G is a little bit better as well, and while the quality is honestly pretty comparable, if you're taking a lot of photos, whether it's for social media or something more professional, I would definitely say the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G in general is going to be a better choice here. But that being said, if you're really more of a casual camera user, you're not recording higher resolution videos, you don't need a ton of features like an ultra-wide camera, and you really just want to get a couple nice photos here and there, the Moto G 5G 5G, while not being quite as good as the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, is still going to get the job done just fine. Now, as far as RAM and processor go, with the Moto G 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. With the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM as well with the MediaTek Dimensity 725G processor. I ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and with the Moto G 5G, we're getting a single core score of 545 and a multi-core score of 1684, and with the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G, we're getting a single core score of 512 and a multi-core score of 1676. So as you can see here, even according to this test alone, they are pretty much in the same ballpark, and I can tell you from experience, you're really not going to see a significant performance difference between the two. But that being said, for what they are, more entry-level 5G phones, they do absolutely get the job done for most daily activities. So if you're doing stuff like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and maybe some mobile gaming here and there, they will get the job done just fine. But keep in mind, if you're doing more high-performance mobile gaming, or really any of those kinds of higher-end activities that take more processing power, then these phones are probably going to struggle a little bit. And of course, neither of these phones are anywhere near as fast as a flagship phone. But again, for more basic activities, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone. But that being said, what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your scores to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not one of these phones will be an upgrade for you. Because if you're coming from a more entry-level phone, most likely one of these phones will be a solid upgrade. But if you're coming from something like an older flagship phone, for example, then it might be a different story. But again, overall, in my experience, I have used both of these devices quite a bit, especially the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. I've had this phone pretty much since it came out, which has been well over a year now, and I personally haven't had any performance issues with either of these phones. Now for the battery, both of these phones do have 5000 mAh batteries, with the Moto G 5G supporting 10W fast charging, and the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G supporting 15W fast charging. So in general, as far as the battery goes, these phones are going to be pretty much the same. Sure, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G supports 5W better fast charging, but really that's not going to make a whole lot of a difference. But in general, with 5000 mAh batteries, you can expect to get great battery life and longevity with either of these phones. As far as other features go, with the Moto G 5G, unfortunately this phone does not have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, unfortunately you're not going to be able to do that with this phone. But the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G does have NFC, so if you do like to use tap and pay, then the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G might be a better choice for you. But in general, which of these devices is better? These phones are so similar that I wouldn't really say one is significantly better than the other. Both are great devices that provide quite a bit of value for the money, and at the end of the day, when you're choosing between these two phones, it's really going to come down to which features you want. On one hand, if you want more storage, and maybe an ever so slightly better display, the Moto G 5G with a slightly higher refresh rate and 256GB of internal storage versus 128 or 64 depending on the variant you get is definitely going to have an advantage here. But on the other hand, maybe you're taking a lot of photos and you want better photo quality, features like an ultra-wide camera, and the ability to record 4K videos, and maybe you use tap and pay a lot so you want NFC. In that case, the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G will have a bit of an advantage. But again, in general, both of these phones are great devices that provide a lot of value for the money, and no matter which one you go for, if you're looking for a 5G phone with a great battery, decent performance, a good camera, and a good display, you're really not going to go wrong with either of these phones. But this concludes my comparison between the Motorola Moto G 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A32 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability because this is always changing. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalip's Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.